thing you could do with your time, but it is one of the most important things that you can do to help maximize your family's nutrition if you're going to be eating whole wheat, okay? So, let's get right into it. This is a very large container of natural yeast. And I'm going to pass this around maybe a couple times actually. But this is basically a mixture of flour and water. And I'm sorry, I know I'm not tall. If you need to stand up so you can see, don't be embarrassed. Maybe I need a tall volunteer to show the stuff up. But basically what this is, it's a mixture of flour and water that houses an entire ecosystem of beneficial bacteria. Okay, these are organisms that exist everywhere in the fundamental building blocks of life. Okay, people ask me all the time, well, what is the difference between commercial yeast and natural yeast? And that's a very hard question to answer because really, while they have the same name, which is yeast, they're really such completely different things. If you have studied biology at all, within biology there are they group things into families. And within yeast, there's actually two separate families of yeast. Commercial yeast is over here in this family. Natural yeast comes over here from this family. So while they both have the name of yeast, they're actually kind of just distant relations. Kind of a cousin of a cousin of a cousin, way back there. So the main difference is commercial yeast is created commercially. It's created in a sterile lab environment. It has been bred, if you've ever raised chickens, you know that you can buy chickens that have had certain traits bred into them so that they won't get broody, so that they'll lay more eggs, so that they'll have these certain qualities. That's what they've done with yeast. They've been able to kind of genetically modify it through breeding to let it have a higher metabolism, a longer shelf life, all these different things. Someone in a class raised her hand once and said, my motto is, if it takes a lab to create it, it takes a lab to digest it. And I think it's probably a pretty accurate assessment. It's something that is created in a sterile environment. It's not something that is naturally occurring. Now, compare that with wild yeast. Anywhere you look, if I were to pick someone at random from the audience and have you come up here and we were to take a little sample from your skin or your hair or even from your mouth, you would find wild yeast all over that person. You would find it all over your kids. Well, I'm sure that's not too hard to believe, right? But you'd have it, it's everywhere. And actually, it is already existing in our digestive systems right now. Whatever you had for dinner, you've got everything that's in here already inside your stomach breaking down food for you. When your doctor prescribes you to get probiotics because you've been on an antibiotic, these organisms are what he's trying to replace, okay? These are things that are just a part of life. These are organisms that have their own DNA. They're not a part of our bodies. They're separate organisms that, and actually scientists call them the first domesticated organisms. So really, and we were joking before, and some of the people who have read my book, I name my starter. I encourage everyone here to name their starter. It helps you think of it more like a pet. But it really is like a pet. You've got this living thing that if you take care of it, it takes care of you. You feed it, it feeds you and your family. So this really is not just dry pack yeast that you can just throw in the fridge and forget about. This is something living that will bring you into its little symbiotic relationship there. So that is what natural yeast is in a nutshell. So let's move on to the why. Why natural yeast? Why do this? And in order to explain why natural yeast is so important, I have to explain a little something about wheat. Wheat is a seed. It's a seed from the grass grain family. You have all these grasses that grow, and these are the seeds that grow from those grasses. All grass grains, are seeds, and all seeds are designed to what? To multiply, to create a plant. They are not designed so that you can come along and take everything that it's got. A seed's job is to protect its vitamins and minerals from mammals like you. And the way that it does that is, right, some cows kind of, traipsing through the field, starts to munch on some of these wheat grasses, consume some of these grains, and then it wanders off into another field, and this little wheat seed is hanging on for dear life to everything that it can. It's vitamins and minerals, everything it needs to make a seed. So as the cow moves to a new area, what happens? The wheat gets popped out the back door, planted in its own little fertilizer patty, and it is free to become a plant. So that is what a seed is designed to do. And it will do that at your expense. It does not want you to have anything that it needs to fulfill its purpose. Okay? Now, if you look at these grass-grain animals, cows, sheep, goats, what do they all have in common? They have multiple stomachs. You look at cows, they've got like 7 stomachs. Is it? Well, I read in one thing of research that there are some that have, like some of these animals that have like 7 different compartments of their stomachs that break down these different grains. It's just phenomenal. And here we are consuming these grains that normally take multiple stomachs to break down, and we're trying to do it in our one little wimpy gut. And it is no wonder that our bodies are like, we cannot take this anymore, please stop. Because our bodies weren't built to break down those grains the way that grass-grain animals were. So let's talk about the wheat. Inside of a wheat berry, now I know some of you brought your book with you. This is what's on page 6. And it's a little late now. I did bring the book, and I wish I had handed them out, even if you were going to get them later or something, just so you could look at the information I'm talking about. But if you've ever seen a diagram of a wheat berry, it looks very similar. If you take a cross-section, it looks like an egg. You've got the hull on the outside, which is like the shell. You've got the endosperm in the middle, which is kind of like the white of the egg. And then you've got the bran, which is like the yolk. Okay, and that it kind of takes that shape. So you've got this little egg, this little wheat berry, and let's talk about it like it's a fortress, okay? Because that's its job, is to protect and to guard. So you've got these 2 components in this fortress that play key roles. One is called phytase, and he's an enzyme. He is a catalyst. Nothing changes in this little wheat seed unless phytase says so. And so what his job is to stand up in this watchtower and wait for the perfect environment. He's waiting for a moist, acidic environment that lasts a certain duration of time. Once that is present, then he calls down into the seed to a little guy named phytic acid. Phytic acid is like the warden. He keeps all the vitamins and minerals chained up and protects them from absorption. So once phytase shouts down to phytic acid and said, hey, guess what? We're in a moist acidic environment. It's lasted a minimum of 6 hours. I think we're good to go. It's time to make a plant. Phytic acid then, who has been tenaciously hanging on, is then free to let go. But unless he gets the all clear from phytase, he is not letting go. So let's say that we have some wheat and it's not been treated. We just pulled it right out of our food storage and we grind it up and we make some bread with it. And we have some toast with our breakfast and we have a nice glass of milk and our toast. There are 5 minerals in particular that are the essential things that phytic acid is holding on to. And it's zinc, iron, magnesium, calcium, and phosphate. And if you know anything about nutrition, you know that those are basically what your body's trying to get from the wheat. When you're consuming wheat, that's what your body needs from the wheat. But that's also what the plant needs from the seed. So only one of you is going to get it. Either the plant gets it or you get it. And phytic acid is the guy in the middle. He's the one that's saying, okay, no, I'm not interested in your health. I'm interested in making this plant. So you have this untreated wheat. You grind it into flour. You make your bread. You have your toast. As you're eating your toast, phytic acid starts coming down through your system. He's holding on to all his vitamins and minerals. And all of a sudden, the calcium from your milk floats by. And he's like, well, what are you doing out there? You're supposed to be in here because I'm holding on to calcium. So he starts grabbing as much calcium as he can get his hands on. So then he goes by and maybe you had some red meat for dinner last night and there's some iron in your bloodstream and maybe, all these different things. And he starts grabbing onto everything he can get his hands on. This is where we get the rickets. This is where we get the malnutrition. This is where we get all those things that they had talked about in that study in Ireland. It's because phytic acid goes through your system, leaching as much as he can get his hands on because he's just doing his job. So this is where science had gotten this far. They said, oh, it's the phytic acid.